I believe we have hello to William and Anonymous. Okay, so there's some questions popping in already. Hello, Karen from Bainbridge Island. What that is? Bainbridge Island. All right, so William asks, thank you for taking our questions, Venerables. In many places in the canon, there is a logical leap made from impermanence and suffering to not self. This is something that I've had trouble with. For example, the Panchavajji Sutta says, is it fitting to regard what is inconstant, stressful, subject to change as, this is mine, this is myself, this is what I am? No, Lord. Why does not self follow from impermanence and suffering? Is it because the notion of a self as described in meditation?
Oh, that's a different question.
I think the system truncated your question, William, but maybe Bhante, would you like to answer the question, why does not self follow from impermanence and suffering?
I think the suttas that we chant here, Kaccanagota Sutta and Dhamma Sutta, and also this morning we were chanting Anatta Lakkana Sutta. They are so wonderful beginnings to this. How we can't have any authority, we can't have any control over the situation when it comes to the form, when it comes to the feeling, when it comes to the sensation and perception and consciousness. And we can't really control. So we see that it is the Buddha asked the monk whether it is impermanent or permanent. Then the monk replied, it is impermanent. Whether it is painful or not, it is painful. And if it is impermanent, if it is subject to change, if it is painful, then can we say we have the authority over them? Can we control over them? That this form should be like this should be not like this. We cannot do that. The same thing with the others. So the five aggregates are completely out of our control. And therefore the Buddha says we don't have to say, we can't really say logically that there is I, me, myself. This is the argument that we have in many suttas regarding this subject.
Thank you, Bhante.
And if I could just add to that, as far as...
sorry to interrupt, Bhante. There's a second follow-up, so maybe you can address this as well. So William says, here's the second half. Is it because the notion of a self as described in the suttas is automatically assumed to be permanent, unchanging, and free from suffering? In other words, is it possible to argue that a self, for lack of a better word, does exist, but it is constantly changing and subject to suffering?
Well, just before handling that, because whenever we get into hypothetical suppositions, it's always dangerous territory. But just coming back to the question of why impermanence naturally leads to the idea of not self. So again, your current experience is a collection of sensations. So let's imagine you were to go through your current experience, so all the sensations that you're currently experiencing, and on each one of them you put a name tag. So in my case, that name would be Bhante Sudaso. So I go through and on every single particle of sensation that I currently have, I label it Bhante Sudaso. Wait 1 moment and check again. And you will see that every single name tag has disappeared. Like whatever sensations you were having a moment ago are now gone. They vanished. So there's an entirely new set of sensations, which may somewhat resemble what was there a moment ago, but it's a completely new set of sensations. And so you can do this again, go through and label all of it me, and wait a moment, and now all of those name tags are gone as well. And you have a new set of sensations. And this also doesn't have any name tags. So you go through and you label everything with your name and you wait a moment and that's all gone. So this is where we can infer not self from impermanence. Because if you take your current moment's experience to be me, then it should always be this way. But you wait a moment and there's something else. So clearly what you had a moment ago was not you. So the sense of self seems to persist independently of any particular aspect of our experience. So for example, when you're angry, we think, I am angry. I am an angry person. That's a self-identity. But then you wait a moment, well, some of us it might take a few minutes or a few hours, as the case may be. But you wait a little bit and the anger disappears. So did you disappear? Did you cease to exist when the anger ceased to exist? The answer is of course not. So that means the anger was not you. It was not yourself. It never was you. It never belonged to you. Rather, it was just a temporary experience. Same goes for every single aspect of our experience. It's just a temporary sensation that arises and ceases. So that means it cannot be ultimately who we are. It can only ever be something temporary that passes through the mind. And what was the second part of the question? Something about a supposition of a possible self.
Yeah, and in other words, is it possible to argue that a self does exist, but that is constantly changing and subject to suffering?
Do you want to answer that?
I would say that it's kind of dangerous going into this working hypothesis, but rather what I kind of encourage, or what I like to do myself in my personal practice, getting back to your original question, is how does how does not self follow from impermanence and suffering? So essentially we see it, for example, when the body breaks, right? So if we, if my my bone breaks, for example, if this body actually really belonged to me, if it was who I was, I could just, with the power of the mind, go like, and now body heal. And it would heal immediately. But it actually doesn't work that way, right? We kind of somewhat understand that the body doesn't really belong to us, to the extent that at least we put some conditions in place. We go to the hospital, or we go to the doctor, we put essentially conditions of healing in place in order to get a beneficial result. But when it comes to emotions, we actually very much think that they are who we are. So whenever, actually, as Bhante was saying, we're experiencing anger, then we're like, I am the angry person, and I will always be the angry person, and I will die an angry person. Or we're like, anxious, and we hate the anxiety, so we relate to it as it belonging to us. And so we usually do the most ineffective technique ever that always has zero results, which is stop anxiety, go away, go away, go away. What it does actually is we become more and more anxious, more and more anxious, more and more anxious. Best case scenario, it doesn't like leave, or it's still there bothering us. Worst case scenario, it actually becomes bigger and bigger. And that's because it's no different than the body. It's just dependently arisen phenomena. So we always focus on controlling the consequences of previous actions that we've had, thinking that they are who we are and that they belong to us. But instead, when we fully understand that these things are impermanent, they're dukkha, and they are impersonal, they are dependently arisen, they are the product of paticca samuppada, essentially, then we understand fully the messages of the Buddha, and we go to focusing on putting the right causes in place rather than controlling the effects. And that's when it becomes a practice that we are understanding and approaching with wisdom. And because we cannot control the consequences, but we can control the causes. So it's no different than going to the doctor, not different than healing, not different than bandaging, putting bandages. We follow the Noble Eightfold Path, and we start cultivating thoughts of, beneficial thoughts of loving kindness instead of thoughts of harming. They're all habits. If we have an angry mind, it's because we constantly are exercising irritation or hatred in the mind. So how about we plant different seeds and then get other results? Otherwise, we're constantly planting tomato seeds expecting to get lettuce, and we're like, hey, lettuce disappear, become sorry, tomatoes disappear, become lettuce. It's completely nonsensical, our approach. So this is what I would have to say. And Anonymous asks, in meditation, focusing on the breath, mind becomes blank, but then I realize I'm not breathing. I suddenly gasp a deep breath and the meditation is over. Should I not worry about the breath vanishing? Well, maybe I'll pass it on to you, Bante.
Well, the most important thing actually is that you're maintaining mindfulness and clear awareness. So the breath vanishing, sometimes that's something that happens as a result of deep concentration and tranquility, but often it's actually just a result of spacing out. So you think your breath is vanishing, but actually you're just spacing out. So make sure that you're actually paying really sharp, intense, clear awareness of your own body. Like really paying close attention to the sensation of your body. And it's normal that as you become increasingly concentrated and peaceful, that your breathing will tend to become more subtle, more soft, more gentle. But it doesn't actually completely disappear until fourth jhana. And let's be realistic, you're not in fourth jhana. And just to be perfectly honest here. So your breath disappearing is probably the spacing out problem rather than the deep concentration effect. That said, I'm also a bit puzzled where you say you take a deep breath and the meditation is over. Why does that mean your meditation is over? In the Buddha's instructions on mindfulness of breathing, he says, when breathing a long breath, one knows I am breathing a long breath. So when you gasp a deep breath, well, be intensely, clearly mindful of the experience of breathing a deep breath. And that means you're still meditating. So whether your breath is short or deep, whether it's fast or slow, whether it's shallow or whether it's rough, or none of that matters as long as you're mindful, as long as you're intensely, clearly aware of your body sensation, then you're still meditating. So you actually should worry about the breath vanishing because, again, I suspect it's a sign that your mindfulness is going slack. But if it actually is just a byproduct of deep concentration, then you don't need to worry about it.
Thank you, Bante. And Sud asks, how can one avoid bad karma from ripening?
One is being mindful about that. You are aware that there is some bad karma or there is some unwholesome thing happening. So just be mindful. First of all, it's very important. And if you are not mindful, then even the bad karma can have more stronger effect on you. So just remember that you have some effect of a bad karma, and then you recognize it and be mindful, and also generate more and more wholesome karma, wholesome thoughts. Let's say like one of the bad karma may be you getting sick, and so when you are sick, maybe you can generate more loving kindness towards the other people who are sick. That's one way of counteracting the sickness within you. And also the other thing is just see the reality of this, the elements of this. And this is also part of our samsara. We can never escape the sickness just like that. It's part of it. So it's an integral part of our life. So just be mindful and not to worry too much about that. And whatever happens, you have to also take it. Of course, you can take some medicine. And also, by being worried, nothing will really help. It will rather aggravate your sickness. And let's say if something is not really working these days for you, everything goes wrong, everything is negative. So then, in that way, maybe you have to start thinking deeply about yourself. What has gone wrong with me? Maybe I have to start making your bed in the early morning, and then open your windows, let the sun come, and maybe cross ventilation. And you have been, some maybe claustrophobic so long, and so you have not been connected with the outside world. Go have some fresh air. Take a look at the outside beautiful sky and the trees and the sun and the moon. Take a look at them, and maybe you will also be connected and be inspired yourself. Looking at the flowers, listening to the birds can also inspire yourself. And also, maybe you have not been working, organizing things yourself. So, organize yourself. Organize your own house, room, your bed, your table, and then you will feel a little bit comfortable. Oh, I'm now a little better. I feel it and I see I feel better. And then you continue to work with a schedule. Maybe I have to complete my household chores, or at the office there are so many things that I have not paid attention to. Think of it, and you will be able to do those things as well. So you have to begin from yourself, and then slowly the confidence will come to you. I remember when we were doing exams, when it comes to the exam days, we see piles and piles of books, so many books to read. How can I read within such a short period of time? Take one book, start reading, and start working on it, and then you will see chapter by chapter. Oh, I'm confident. I have finished at least one. So every step will be boosting confidence for you, so that you can keep working on it. And then eventually you will notice that your stress level is also getting lesser and lesser, and your confidence will grow. So these are some of the things actually practically that we have to work on. And sometimes if you're really, really down, maybe do some chanting. That maybe that time you won't be able to even close your eyes and practice meditation, but maybe chanting will be really helpful. That time, that healing touch of those chantings will give you some peace. That is one thing that you also can do. And also walking meditation can be helpful, and eventually um, yeah, you can get rid of it by deeply concentrating on what you do.
Thank you, Bhante. And Sudoso has another question. Why is it that human birth is thought of as an ideal place where you can attain full enlightenment, when Deva realms, like Brahma realms, tend to give eons of time to practice? Well, because it's very comfortable, a little too comfortable. Actually, right before I ordained as a monastic, I remember I went to Italy, and I hadn't been in Italy in quite a long time, so it was enough distance to be able to actually enjoy it, and forget all the reasons why I had left Italy. Why it was unsatisfying. I remember I spent a month there with my friends from my previous life within this life, who are my best friends, and I have so many things in common. And we were in this really beautiful place by the beach, eating this really delicious food, and I was having really a great time. Usually I was in New York. We were running. This was before Empty Cloud Monastery. I was running all of these this meditation center, so there was a lot of work and a lot of different things that I was dealing with every day. But I was making progress with the Dhamma, and I was very, very like, yeah, this is the right path. But I went to Italy after a while. It was like, it's really comfortable. Why am I doing that thing in like New York again? All the meditation practice. Oh, I'm like really okay right now. Like, it's actually quite pleasant. But then I remembered how, I grew up in Italy, and I had always had that sort of, sensual pleasures and this and that. And after a while that you keep having, you are surrounded by sensual pleasures, you become accustomed to them, and they're not fulfilling. So of course there's the gratification, but then it's impermanent, that gratification, and then it's dukkha. So I remember that, and I was like, okay, remember how it wasn't satisfying. Remember that actually the only happiness that you have found so far that is actually reliable has been through Dharma practice. So then I stopped and I went back to samsara within samsara, back to New York City. The United States, it's both comfortable and uncomfortable, I have to say. Definitely New York was extremely uncomfortable in a lot of different respects, but it's really great for Dharma practice. You can really see the nature of samsara to a certain degree. And that gives you, the fuel to work. So it's the same. The human realm has a great deal of suffering, even in the best case scenario. And especially in the Brahma realm, you can be so deluded. You can think you're omnipotent, omniscient, you've been there forever, like you're the creator of the world. We don't want more delusion. We want to actually end that cycle here and now. Then, of course, you have to pick which destination better, the higher realms than the lower realms, because then, it's quite difficult in the lower realms to even get in touch with the Dhamma to begin with. But that would be my thoughts. I don't know if the Venerables have any other things in mind.
That's about the human realm, right?
Yes.
Human realm is, in a way, is more superior than any other realm, I would say, because here we can do more good karma too. We can help many people and transfer merit to others, share the merits with others. We can do jobs, we can do farming, we can do other businesses, earn money and be rich, wealthy, and also practice. All these things can be done here. But in the Brahma realm or heavenly realm, they are who they are because of their good karma that they have done here. So beyond that, they can do much. And so only human realm has the capacity to produce Samma Sambuddhas and Pacheka Buddhas and also Arahantas. And in the Deva realm and the Brahma realm, there is only possibility to become Arahant. That is the case. Yes, as Thomas said, in the Brahma realm, the duration is so long. And for example, in the Mahabrahma realm, one day there is 1 eon here. And when it comes to the Akanita Brahma realm, it is said like 70,000 eons. So that's so long. That's right. They can see the world systems appear and disappear. Buddhas come and go. Many people are born, and the great oceans come and go. And they see that the suns come and go. They see all of them. So they feel like I am supreme. I am everlasting. So they have the ego, and then later on, when that karma is over, they have to descend here. They have to land up here. One time, the Buddha, it's very interesting. When a Buddha saw a buffalo, he had a smile. And then Venerable Anand asked why the Blessed One was having a gentle smile, looking at that buffalo. The Buddha said, this buffalo once was a Brahma. Can you imagine the infinite nature of the samsara? It's so scary in a way, but that is how it is. So all the dukkhas you can see here, and it is also important to see this the dukkha in the samsara. I think all the Buddhas would come up with those four noble truths: the cause of suffering, the truth of suffering, the cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. This is a process. It doesn't come to you overnight. And in the Brahma realm, definitely they wouldn't be able to see that if they don't see the suffering. They will see all the happiness, all the comfort, all the joy. They don't see the suffering. That is it.
Sadhu, thank you, Bhante. Yes, once I started actually, I don't like the word believing, but let's use believing for lack of better words in rebirth. Wow, that so totally shifted my practice precisely because even I was also thinking, wow, also I'm making so many good deeds. I might go to heaven realm. That is so scary. If I'm getting, sidetracked just by a few weeks in Italy with my friends, I can't even imagine in the heavenly realms. So I was like, Sutapanna right now. So then no turning back. And Billion says, would psychiatric medication prescribed by a qualified professional hinder progress on the path? I'm on the bipolar spectrum and take medication to, as my psychiatrist says, slow down the brain.
So a few thoughts come to mind, but the first one to really think about is just to be practical about these things. It's not easy to make a blanket statement like, would psychiatric meditation slow down your progress? I would say it really depends upon the person. So some people, their mental disorder is strong enough that it's actually really hard for them to make progress on the path if they don't take their medication. And medication helps them get into a more stable state of mind where it's easier for them to practice Buddhism. So for someone like that, I actually think it's really important that they take the medication and then practice as best they can. But there might also be other people who maybe they're overly medicated and it just makes them dull. Or maybe they're given the wrong medication and it makes them confused or sleepy or something. And that might be problematic to some degree. But I would say as a general rule, if your psychiatric medication helps you to be more stable, more alert, more present, more peaceful, then that's all things which are supportive to being able to practice Buddhism well. And also keeping in mind that psychiatric medication is impermanent like everything else. So sometimes after being on medication for a few years, then things change and a person doesn't need it anymore. That can sometimes happen, but these are things that you talk about with your doctor. It's not something that some random monk on YouTube can tell you what to do with your medication. But it does sometimes happen that over time these things can change. But yeah, I mean, ultimately it's about watching your mind and seeing what is of benefit. And if you actually think that your medication is weakening your mindfulness or weakening your self-restraint or weakening your wisdom, well, talk about that with your doctor and see if your doctor might consider trying out something a little bit different, maybe changing the dosage or changing the medicine or something. But you always want to be in consultation with your doctor whenever you have any kind of mental disorder, because it's very easy to get a wrong self-perception. I've known some people in my life who one day they just decided they didn't need to take their meds anymore. They're like, yeah, I don't need those. And within a couple of days, it becomes incredibly clear that, yeah, they do need those medicines. And bad things happen when they don't take their medications. So again, these are things you need to be in constant consultation with your doctor about. Those are my thoughts on the matter anyway.
Thank you, Bhante. I always like to quote actually Bhante Sujata's message on the subject matter that goes, Buddhism starts when psychology ends. So we want to be in a good place psychologically, and medicine can very much help. And if it's prescribed, there is a reason why it's prescribed. So very important not to be freelancers about it. I mean, there are people who actually study go to school with this. They don't just, read Google articles on mental health conditions. So very important. And Sud asks, is there any benefit to intellectually understanding not self in terms of avoiding bad rebirths, even if one doesn't rise out of the realm of being one of those pathogenic individuals?
Yeah, I also have sometimes, thinking of the non-self, and then
intellectually understanding not self in terms of avoiding bad rebirths, even if one doesn't rise out of the realm of being one of those pathogenic individuals.
So intellectually understanding in the sense that if you go through some of those suttas, you can also intellectually understand that, and maybe really go deep into that matter when you meditate, and also in day-to-day life when you experience so many things as a puthujana or a mundane person, you will feel so many traumatic or depressing situations. Then if you can really calmly, peacefully apply that intellectual conclusion or understanding that you have, then it will be really helpful. But the point is, when you have those very traumatic situations, you even forget where you are, what you do, and you completely out of your mind, and you don't know how to apply that theory in practical level. So I think it is really important that you constantly practice meditation. Constantly practice in the sense not only sitting, but also walking, talking, working, thinking. Every time you are a little bit more mindful, a little bit more attentive to what you do, what you think, what you say. And that way you will be able to figure out more easily when you react to certain situations. Let's say, like, there is a situation at your office, someone is yelling at you and you don't know how to control. You just react to that situation right away, and the anger comes up, and then you don't know what you say. Even you have no control with your anger. You just would say things in such a harsh manner that you might even lose your job. Then you come back home, you will have another problem. You lost your job, and then the family life also will be affected. And then problems will multiply every single day. So rather than reacting negatively, if you could save your anger, maybe if you could suppress your anger for a 90 second or something with that, epicenter, then you could avoid the tsunami. You could avoid a lot of devastating effect on your life and your job and your career and things like that. So it will be very helpful if we could do that. But it doesn't come to you without any practice. You constantly need patience, practice, and then it will be easier for you to recognize the thought. For example, when the anger comes, if you don't many people don't even know that we are angry. So you just keep talking and without any control, right? And then what happens in meditation, we train ourselves. For example, when we do the anapanasati, we train ourselves to recognize the breath, incoming breath, outgoing breath, long breath, short breath. We recognize, and even subtle breath, as someone was talking about before. So we recognize all of them right now, right here. And so this practice will eventually help us in recognizing our own thoughts. When and as and when they rise, we will recognize them. And then we will be able to have more control over the matter in practical life. That way, as Puthujjanas, we will also be able to focus more and control more in getting rid of some of those unwholesome, bad karmic effect into ourselves.
So thank you, Bhante. And I think you also answered Julie's question, how to let go when we feel wronged. In these moments, I start identifying as a self and I want to feel in control. I think
Yeah, I think that covers it. Yeah.
And Patricia has a question for me. Aya, would you speak about your experience of learning, teaching the Dhamma not in your first language and about learning Pali? Any tips? So, my experience of learning the Dhamma, not in my first language, was actually very good. Actually, extremely beneficial because there are some really bad translations in Italian of the suttas. And, well, I learned also in English, but since English is not my first language, a lot of the suttas also use religious terminology, which in Italian is very familiar to me because I grew up there. So I know the religious terminology, like Catholic religious terminology. So when I first picked up anything Buddhist sutta related, I had a very strong reaction and I wanted to close it immediately, even though I was familiar with the suttas. But in English, on the other hand, I learned later actually through some other friends that on the other hand were English is their first language, that certain terms, I think like defilements, Bhante, is also like from the Bible or like words like that.
I don't know.
Anyway, there's a lot of different words that are used. Merit apparently is also used within Christianity, but all these words are kind of new to me. So also saying things like, and now let's worship the Buddha, you know, I have no problem saying that in English, but if I am to translate that in Italian, it sounds horrible. It sounds something that I could never say because, yeah, it has that strong Catholic connotation. So I think that actually was, yeah, allowed me an opening and just to focus on the substance of the Dhamma rather than the form. And so it removed a karmic obstruction, I guess, that we can have as converts. And teaching the Dhamma, oh, well, I mean, I never really decided to teach the Dhamma. I still don't think of myself as a teacher. I just, for certain causes and conditions, I was thrown to speak about the Dhamma. That's more really what happened. And it mainly happened actually with the pandemic because Bhante Sudaso didn't want to do all the live streams by himself. So he forced me, and I was literally terrified. One, because I didn't feel comfortable. I felt I was too junior, and also in a language that is not mine. So it was just terrible. So yeah, actually, it's been a great practice of non-self, of not, thinking about having to be the most impressive speaker because, you know, it's kind of failure in advance. And just, focusing on what is important, the teachings of the Buddha, and sharing that. So it's been a great practice of self-forgiveness and of focusing once again on what is important, on the substance rather than the form, and on, transcending my ego. Being okay with being terrible at doing something is a great learning. This being said, learning Pali has been extremely fascinating because it's been really interesting way of contemplating what exactly certain words mean, and what was the initial intention of the Buddha. And also because I've been doing Pali to English first with the help of Bhante Sudaso, and then Pali to Italian. And it was very interesting to translate it then in Italian, because actually Italian and Pali are closer than English and Pali. So then it was very fascinating to really look at actually the meaning of the words. And I'm still in the process of finishing certain translations. So yeah, it's more, I mean, even though it's an intellectual practice, it's actually more of a heart practice, interestingly enough. So I hope that, yeah, my terrible English made sense in answering your question.
I remember when I was a young Samanera, those days we were also asked to give Dhamma talk. We were very little, you know. So at the beginning, we were just reading the Dhamma talks written by other monks. So they were recorded and written. So I was reading them, just reading, as if I am the original Dhamma speaker. And sometimes we would learn the entire Dhamma talk by heart. That's another way. Those days it was so easier for us to remember by heart, so we would also take were doing it. And then I remember one time I learned a list of things, and in the Dhamma hall we have a special platform called Dhamma Asana. It's a platform we are inside, and there is a like a majestic chair, and we sit, and a lot of people around. And then I kept talking, and so I was talking about that list, and I forgot one word. And after that, nothing came to my mind. I was so stuck. I was like fainting, and I asked someone to give me some water. That was an experience that we had. Yeah, those things happened to us when we were young Samaneras. So it's not easy teaching the Dhamma, but as we were encouraged to teach the Dhamma like that, so eventually we were able to give Dhamma talk for an hour on the spot. That came to us. It's not overnight. It's long-term practice teaching.
Yes, thank you, Bante. Yes, also here at the Cloud, we have the practice of not preparing talks, which is another layer of terrifying to the whole operation, both for the speaker and for the listeners, actually. Sometimes it's not as charming as it might sound. And then Celestino says,
Is it Italy?
he is actually. We met him in Italy when we went there in Brescia. Can you please tell me more about how to follow the Buddha's instruction to Aruna to evaluate always the intention before letting go, or when any thought arises in the mind? Sutaso?
I assume he's referring to a particular sutta, but I'm not sure what sutta he's referring to. But as far as evaluating intention, so it is actually evaluating our intentions is an extremely important part of Buddhist practice. The Buddha said, "Kamma is intention. Intention is kamma." So ultimately, it matters. Actually, it matters more why we're doing what we're doing rather than what we're doing. Why we're doing it is more important. And this is because if we establish good intentions, then we will also start to investigate the potential consequences of our choices, and therefore make good choices. So first establishing a very clear, wholesome intention in the mind. So first off, the intention to not cause any harm. And second, the intention to try to bring benefit to all the beings affected. And then you start investigating what benefit really means, how to bring the most benefit. You start investigating the different options that you have and how each one will affect the beings involved so that you can most faithfully fulfill your intention. So yeah, intention is extremely important in evaluating our choices. As for when thoughts arise in the mind, actually, when thoughts arise in the mind, the first thing to check is, am I doing this intentionally? Most of the mental objects that appear, you'll realize you're not intentionally producing them, but rather they're just things that appear in the mind seemingly of their own accord. Just as sounds appear in the ear of their own accord, we don't create them. Sights appear in front of the eye, but we don't create them. In the same way, most of the objects that pass through the mind are not things that we're creating at that moment. They're things that arise because of past causes and present conditions. So it's good to view thoughts as not me, but just impermanent sensory impressions that come and go. Then they'll have no effect on you. They won't disturb you or distract you. So those are a few thoughts.
Thank you, Venerable. And hello to Venerable Gyanaratna. Good to see you online, and thank you for the kind words. Hopefully, Bhante, you're also learning English and will be able to give some talks in English soon. Bhante is the Bengali monk that had taught with us a while back.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
And Shadow of Label asks, what is Sutapanna? I met a Buddhist in Discord from China, and he was talking about how God, the Christian God, is considered Sutapanna and attained first awakening or something.
I don't know about the Christian God attaining Sutapanna. First of all, it will be very hard for them, I think, because Sakkaya Ditthi, or that self-identity, is strongly implanted in many of us. Even Buddhist people, it's so difficult to break that first barrier. If it is possible, of course, it's not really impossible. It is possible. So I would say that theoretically, Sakkaya Ditthi, Vicikiccha, Silabbata Parama, so these are the three fetters. The self-identity, and then the all kinds of doubts, and then those rites and rituals. We have to somehow break that barrier. That will be the opening for the Sotapanna. And when you are in Sotapanna, you will see that that I-making process is no more in you, that you will be able to break it up, that I-making thing. And this is very important for a Sotapanna person. So Sota means stream and Apanna means enterer. And once you enter the stream, there is always a chance for you to go all the way to the great ocean. That is the Nibbana. So that is the only way that we can get rid of the sansaric misery. So that is the first stage of sainthood as well.
Thank you, Bhante. And Shadow of Label asks, why do Buddhists believe in an Atman, but Hindus believe in Atman? How did this idea evolve from Hinduism to Buddhism? Well, I think your question is a little bit flawed, if I may say. What it sounds to me is kind of like saying, see how I can paraphrase, but how is it that whatever people believed that the world was flat, but then they believed that the world is round? It's not that like one starts believing in things, but rather one understands how things actually are. So essentially, Atman, first of all, is not something specific to Hindus, but actually pretty much any single religion and non-religion, even atheism, believes in anatta, in anatta, not anatta. So in a self. YOLO is exactly that. You only live once. You only have an anatta once. And then it destroys. Because that's essentially our experience of the world. Just like we experience the world being flat. Every single day we experience the world being flat. So how do we understand? How do we know that the world is not flat? That planet Earth is not flat. by doing the research, like whoever in the past, all different scientists that layered up, and then it was Galileo, right? That discovered that the world was round. Wow. And since Buddhism, I eliminated all my secular knowledge, so I've become ignorant. But I think it was Galileo, right? Was it Galileo? Anyway, someone, a scientist, then managed to prove it. And in fact, it was considered heresy by the Catholic Church back in the day. So it's the same. The Buddha did the hard work on himself and understood the way that things are, and so that there is no permanent self, whether it's YOLO or whether it's like only lives in a particular amount of time, but that is who I am, or that lives eternally with God, or whatever type of iteration that people believe in, but rather that that our sense of self is dependently arisen and is constantly changing. And most importantly, that there is a way out of this whole mass of dukkha. So yeah, I would say that it's more to equate the Buddha as a scientist, as someone who actually does the work and understand how things are, rather than all of a sudden the Buddha goes, oh, okay, now I'll believe that there is no self. And and all these followers just believe another thing that is different from those other followers. So this is my 2 cents on the matter. I don't know if the Venerables have anything to add on.
I really like the flat earth analogy. That's great. I'd also just briefly comment, by the way, that it's not accurate to say that Buddhism evolved from Hinduism, because what we call Hinduism these days didn't even really exist in the time of the Buddha. So in the time of the Buddha, there were many different religious and spiritual practices going on, and some of them eventually evolved into what these days we would call Hinduism. But many of those religions at the time of the Buddha died out. They didn't last. And so it's not quite correct to say that Hinduism predates Buddhism, because Hinduism, as we talk about it these days, didn't even really exist at the time. But you can see the seeds of Hinduism were starting to emerge in these different religious and spiritual systems at the time. That's a minor point. It's more of a historical curiosity.
Great, thank you, Bhante. Maybe you want to also take the anonymous, what is the difference between Ibana and Paranibana?
I think that's a great question for Bhante Sumita.
All right, great. Bhante?
So the 2 Pali words, if we break it up, bana or vana means craving or tanha, and ni means negation or absence. So nibbana means the absence, complete absence of all sorts of attachments, all sorts of cravings. So it is not to be born in another realm when you attain nibbana. It is just that state of that absence, complete absence of all sorts of cravings and attachments. And Parinibbana is also explained as Pari is Parisamantato Tayati Rakyati iti Paritang, it is said. So Pari means overall. That word means. But here Parinibbana actually means the passing away of the Buddha. It is like the person who is living, there is called Kilesa Parinibbana. That's also a kind of Parinibbana. Kilesa Parinibbana means all the defilements are gone. Complete eradication of all sorts of defilements is called Kilesa Parinibbana. And then Kanta Parinibbana is when that Arahanta person, the Pacheka Buddha person, or the Sammasambuddha person, when he passes away, that body is also gone. So that is called Kanda Parinibbana. And so there is another one, Sopadisesa and Nirupadisesa Parinibbana. It is almost the same. So Upadisesa and ni upadisesa. That means the living arahant and the passing away of the arahant. That is the meaning of those words.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Bhante. That was very thorough and also in a very short amount of time. Very impressed. Living encyclopedia. And Kristen, you're very kind. Thank you for your words. And Aileen, okay, I'll pass this on to Bhante, asks, how do I handle having to see a person I dislike? Very relatable question.
There's also a continuation.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the answer. I love that you have the question and the answer. It's perfect. I try being mindful when having to interact with them and include them in my metta meditation, but I still find it hard to have a friendly attitude towards them. Do you have any advice for me?
Yeah, so do more metta. And also, I do not recommend thinking of the person during your metta meditation. That's actually a great way to sabotage your meditation. So if there's someone who, whenever you think about them, you start to get annoyed and irritated, well, that's actually not going to be particularly good for your meditation, is it? So when you're doing metta meditation, I actually recommend thinking about other people, people who you like, people who you naturally have metta for, and build up a very strong metta in your heart. And then that's what you want to try to sustain all the time. As for this particular person, actually do kind things for them. That's one of the most potent ways of dealing with people who you dislike. Go out of your way to do nice things for them. Give them little gifts, say nice words, be kind of over the top about it, actually. Be like really over the top, friendly and kind and nice to that person. And if the person has some really annoying personality traits or something that really bothers you, you can also have pity for them. So pity is not quite wholesome, but it's much better than hatred. So at least think like, oh, it's so sad that this person is making bad choices and generating resentment in other people and so on. Like it's really sad that this person has these bad traits, and may this person develop wholesome traits. May this person develop good habits. May they develop better ways of interacting with others. So it's a way of starting to turn your negativity into compassion. So that tendency to fixate on the bad qualities of a person, you can use that as a stepping stone to get towards pity, and from pity to get towards compassion. So this is a way of starting to turn around the mind to a more wholesome state. Yeah, those are my thoughts. Again, do lots of metta. So every single day you should be doing a few minutes of metta meditation. And if you're still having problems with the person, then double your metta. And keep doubling it every day until eventually you stop having problems. Yeah, be really kind to the person. Try to have pity for them, and from pity get to compassion. Those are a few thoughts.
All right, thank you, Bhante. And Kitty asks, I just got a promotion in my job. It's not time consuming and I'm one of the top employees, not to brag. I always worry about getting fired and I constantly think about my job. How can I get a balance? Is it my turn? I don't remember. Not
It's
that
your
there's
turn.
a turn. All right. Well, I would focus actually on, first of all, congratulations that you got a promotion. But I would focus instead of like, this is how acquisitions, it's the tricky thing of acquisitions, acquiring, then you're fearful about them disappearing so you don't even enjoy them while they're there. It's so crazy. So I would do two things. First of all, just a personal practice that I normally do with anything that I start noticing my mind getting attached to it. I just pretend that it's already happening, like the worst case scenario. For example, we've been having problems with Bhante Sumita's visa to go to our imminent trip in Italy. And I was really attached, to the, like, no, he has to come with us. It's completely unacceptable. And there was so much suffering in my mind. So I'm trying to make it happen, and working hard for the conditions to be there. But at the same time, I also have accepted that he's not going to come. Like, I've created the scenario in my mind and let go. So everything is like a win-win, the lower your expectations are, the better the outcome. There was a saying today, I always quote the Thai sayings, but butchering them, so I'm going to butcher it. But something that was along when I went there, they were like, you always want to lose, so then you're always winning, because or something like that, right, Aya? Yeah, essentially, if we're wanting to win, then there's two outcomes, right? That come, either we lose or we win, but there's this struggle, there's this dukkha that is constantly permeating our experience. But if we aim at losing, we're like, oh, all right, either you're already accomplished what you were aiming at, or you have something to gain. This is one approach to somewhat, let go and establish equanimity. And then also within your job, instead of focusing on, once again, acquisition, so then there's more and more that you are afraid to let go of, how about instead you turn around and you look at all your co-workers and friends and bosses and whatever, and use them as a nice playground where to practice the Dhamma and cultivate wholesome mind states, and go what can I do that is nice for these people around? And so the more you practice Dhamma, actually, the more, paradoxically, this fear eliminates, but also the causes of that fear to arise. Because then, since you're going to be the nicest person in the office, you're going to be the last person they're going to lay off, I tell you. So there are many qualified people in the world, but very, very few nice qualified people in the world. So there you go. In 1 second, you've eliminated both the causes of your personal suffering and the causes of your potential being fired in the future. So this is what comes to mind. And Sud says, Dear Venerables, what is the significance of the Mahasamaya Sutta? It seems like this is a chanted, but what should one keep in mind while chanting it? What should be our purpose in chanting it?
Mahasamaya Sutta actually talks about so many yakas. Mahasamaya Sutta also is mostly, if there is a all-night chanting, we remember it is mostly chanted in the middle of the night, like 2 to 4 something. So it's also a very powerful sutta. How all those yakas, when they also come to Buddha and pay respect to them, it's also one of the great attributes of the Buddha, that he was able to dominate all those monsters. Not only the devas, brahmas, not only the humans, but also those those powerful monsters. They who could actually do so much damage to other people, other sentient beings. And also they are just like in the human realm, something like gangsters, who are very difficult to deal with. And so they are very difficult to control. And Buddha had such an amazing power to control over them as well. And some of those, in the Deva realm, it is said, Chatu Maharajika Deva world, for example. They one of those Deva realm is called Kuvera, and they are that is the king of all those monsters. And but that king of all those monsters, yakas, also is an ardent follower of the Buddha. And so it is said, when you have fear, you think of those Chatu Maharajika Devas. So they will take care of you. That's another way. Like even in the Dajaka Sutta, I remember the god Sakka talks about this fear. Ayasoma was just talking about the fear of losing the job, and a lot of people have fear, and so even when someone has fear, even the devas have fear. All those people have fear. All those sentient beings have fear. Animals have fear too. So to get rid of fear, they do so many different things. And in the Deva realm, that Deva said, when you have fear, you think of my flag. You think of my flag and all those four devas, four Chatu Maharajika devas flags. Then they will take care of you. And then the Buddha said, even if you think of them, you wouldn't be able to do it, because those devas are also not arahants. They have not actually completely eradicated their defilement, their own fear too. So if you have fear, think of the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. That was the advice of the Buddha in the Tajaka Sutta. So the Samhasamaya Sutta, in fact, is a very powerful sutta. It's a little bit longer sutta.
Sadhu, thank you, Bhante. And Niranjan asks, Venerable Bhikkhu and Bhikkhuni, is there an arahant in this world currently? Sutasa?
Probably many, actually. So wherever you have bhikkhus and bhikkhunis who are sincerely practicing the Dhamma Vinaya, then a small percentage of them will become arhants. So currently there's somewhere around 500 million or so Buddhists in the world. There's a couple million bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. Yeah, odds are pretty good that there's a few arhants.
Yeah. Most common in Asia.
Yeah.
Sorry, bad news.
Well, for one thing, they have most of the Buddhists.
Exactly, it's a number game.
The thing is, when we have a degree, like a doctoral degree, a BA, MA, we like to highlight that I'm doctor, master. But when an arahant is there, he would never do that. So you can have counting of those arahants, how many arahants are there on the first place. And if someone says that, that itself will be a disqualification. I was surprised to see some of them like arahant, they write books called arahant.
Yeah,
it is very funny.
Bhante so-and-so, MA, BA,
Yeah.
arahant. It's like, wait, what?
Yeah, the Buddha said that as long as there is Dhamma, as long as you practice the Dhamma, the world will not be empty of arahants.
Sadhu.
So that means you and I still have a chance.
Yes, the resume arahats seem to be like, especially in the West, for some reason.
And also especially
in
unimpressive.
America. Yeah.
I have to say.
So yeah, that's a clear warning sign whenever you see the business card, arahant. Not an arahant. And Deborah asks, could you speak on the difference between faith and belief? I'm always so impressed how carefully you read and answer our questions. So difference between faith and belief. So I'll share my interpretation, which belief to me sounds more kind of like a really arbitrary, baseless, irrational belief, sort of like, oh, the world is made of polka dots, or like, I don't know, there are unicorns that are flying here in the room right now because I decided that this is the case, or that the world is a triangle, like whatever. It's just, and then believing in it. And usually, actually, this is the approach that we take a lot of the times in religion in the West. So the biggest problem that I've seen, for example, convert Buddhists or people who, left their sort of religion of birth will approach then Buddhism with the idea that, oh, these things are unprovable and arbitrary. I was one of them. So I was just like, oh yeah, like whatever. It's just like random belief. I don't really have to think too much about it, like karma and rebirth, whatever. But faith is something a little bit different. It's something, so we actually have a lot of faith in so many things. We have faith that Russia exists, even if though we've never been to Russia. We have faith that the theory of relativity is actually like an actual thing, even though maybe, we have elementary knowledge of mathematics. And yeah, we have faith in many different things. And that faith comes from an experience of the world where we take something as a working hypothesis and then it proves to be reliable. And so I would say that is more close to the faith that we're developing in Buddhism. At least that's definitely my faith in the Buddha's teachings. Was actually, I took on the challenge of Venerable Robina Kurtin, a Tibetan bhikkhuni that removed a lot of doubt in my mind by literally slapping my face with some really good Dhamma. And she was like, yeah, take this as a working hypothesis. Try to prove the Buddha wrong. And I was like, yeah, all right, I'll try to prove the Buddha wrong. Mission unaccomplished to this day. So then you start developing faith because you see how the teachings of the Buddha are real, like are practical or experiential. And so even the things that you can't experience immediately, you go like, yeah, so far so good. Well, clearly, there is I'm already experiencing cessation of suffering. So clearly, like the complete end of suffering is possible, since if I practice these teachings, if I continue practicing these teachings. So anyway, this would be my rambling answer to the distinction, but maybe my venerable brothers might have something else to say.
I think that's good.
It's okay? All right. And hello, Ayasudama. Good to see you. Great to see all these venerables watching tonight. So she says, nice hanging out with you, venerables, this evening. Likewise, the question about how to follow the Buddha's instructions to Aruna surely meant Rahula. They were likely asking the question that often arises from the Ambalataka Rahulovada Sutta, to not take any unwholesome action by body, speech, or mind. The question being, how to prevent a thought? I have an answer, but I'm interested in yours.
Well, as I was saying earlier, many of the thoughts that appear in our mind are not things that we're creating in that moment, but rather they're echoes of things we've thought in the past, or things that we've heard other people say, or things that we've seen. So it's not things that we're deliberately producing, but rather it's just sensory impressions passing through the field of the mind. The same as, like right now in the distance, I can hear rain falling, but I'm not creating those sounds. It's just sensory impressions passing through the field of the ear. So it's important to recognize the distinction between thoughts which appear of their own accord versus thoughts that we deliberately create. So thoughts that we deliberately create, we're producing karma, and we should be very careful not to deliberately produce unwholesome thoughts. But thoughts which are appearing of their own accord, well, if they're unwholesome, then we should not participate in those thoughts. We should not strengthen them. We should let them fade away immediately, not to get involved in them. If they're wholesome thoughts, then we might consider preserving them and participating in them. if we have unwholesome thoughts repeatedly appearing in the mind, then that might be an indication that we're doing something to create those thoughts. So we should also consider, what are we doing on a daily basis, which is causing thoughts to appear in the mind? So, for example, you might not be deliberately thinking thoughts of violence, but you spend 6 hours a day watching violent movies. Well, that's probably why violent thoughts are appearing in your mind, and maybe you should stop watching violent movies all the time. Not you, Aya, but lay people. Presumably, you don't watch violent movies. But yeah, so considering, what are we doing that's creating the conditions for unwholesome thoughts to appear in the mind? They don't just come out of nowhere. They have causes and conditions. So instead, creating the causes and conditions for wholesome thoughts to appear, that will be supportive. So those are a few thoughts I have on the question.
Thank you, Bhante. And maybe Bhante Sumita, anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think it's very important that first of all we recognize whether we have thoughts and whether we have unwholesome or wholesome thoughts. The thing is, the thoughts are so faster, and we can't even imagine the speed of the thought. There is no machine in the world faster than the thought, no vehicle faster than the thought. So it can come up, it can pop up anytime, even in the midst of your meditation. Sometimes really weird thoughts can come to you. And it's rather easier in the meditation because you are a little bit more focusing, and but still you might get lost. You don't even know how you are being carried away by those thoughts. And in a regular daily life, those thoughts can come to you, and if you don't have any training, you will simply don't know what to do, and you will be simply carried away by thoughts, reacting to those thoughts negatively or whatever. And let's say, like, you see a form, you see someone very pleasant, and you immediately judge. You have the greed, or you have the desire towards that person or that thing. Or else, if that is an unpleasant person or unpleasant thing, you will immediately have a judgment of that, a negative thought. So, like, let's say, like, if you hate someone, still you are holding. It's not like giving it up. You are holding it to that person or thing as well. So this craving and hatred, they are the two sides of the same coin. So it is that is why we have to be very careful about these things before judging. When we see things, when we hear things, when we smell, when we taste, and when we touch, and even those thoughts that come to us, we have to be careful. It can be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Um, Most of them are actually neutral too. But those pleasant and unpleasant feelings can generate really unwholesome karma. And that's how we create karma. And that's how we are in the samsara. If we are able to recognize them, and then if we can stop creating karma, that will shorten our samsara.
Thank you, Venerables. And Niranjan says, Venerable, I asked to the world chairwoman, Bhikkhuni Dhammawati, the same question. She said there is no arhat currently, and she suggested me to read the Tipitaka seriously.
Well, first off, there is no world chairwoman of bhikkhunis because there is no world organization of bhikkhunis. So the Buddhism does not have any central power structure at all. The Buddha did not create central power structures. So any power structures are things that have been created after the Buddha. So I'm sure that bhikkhuni is a chairwoman of something, but she doesn't represent all the bhikkhunis in the world. As for her opinion on the matter, well, she has her opinion, and you'd have to ask her why she has that opinion. I don't think any one of us can speak for her opinion on that matter. But I do agree with her advice to read the Tripitaka. That's really good advice.
That's the best way.
Yeah.
Yes, to practice to become an arhat ourselves rather than just being so focused on whether other people are arhats. And Sud asks, dear variables, how does one deal with intrusive thoughts that show up, especially during meditation and don't stop? Should one think this is not self, etc.? Or are there any techniques? Should one stop meditation at that point since it's not causing calm, which would be a desired effect? I think so. Didn't we address this already? I think.
Actually, yeah, I think we pretty thoroughly covered that one. Yeah. I don't recommend stopping meditation just because you're having intrusive thoughts. Sometimes we actually need to change our practice. So if you're trying to still your thoughts and the thoughts just keep popping up, well, then stop trying to still your thoughts and instead observe the impermanent nature of the thoughts. Observe the uncontrollable nature of those thoughts. So yeah, as you're saying, recognizing this is not me, this is not mine, this is not who I am. But just seeing the thoughts as a constantly changing stream of uncontrollable phenomena. And then you'll discover that there's a peacefulness which comes through watching that stream of ever-changing mental objects. Yeah, I don't recommend stopping meditation just because you have intrusive thoughts. If that's what you did, well, I mean, for one thing, you would never attain awakening. And two, it means that the average meditation period would last about 1/10 of a second. So that's just learning how to accept thoughts appearing in the mind as part of meditation practice. And sometimes the mind will be free of thoughts. That happens every now and then, and it's nice, it's true. And sometimes it won't be. And so you need to learn how to not be distracted by thoughts, how to not take any interest in those thoughts. Then they won't be a problem.
Yeah, thank you, Bante. The other thing that I would add is stop obsessing so much that your meditation needs to be calm and peaceful. Like desired effect, well, that means that then we're basically cultivating craving. I mean, a more wholesome state of craving. But actually, my best retreats were when my mind was not calm, was not peaceful, but actually it was a whole emotional disaster. And and actually, yeah, I was, for example, in one Bhavana society, it was so great because it was so horrible. But it was great because I did not have a driver's license nor a car, and I could not leave the middle of nowhere in West Virginia by myself. So
that's a blessing in disguise.
It was. Yes, it was. Because I was full of, it was an intensive retreat. And at the very beginning, actually, I was having a great, peaceful, blissed mind. And then all of a sudden, these thoughts of greed, hatred, and delusion, and a lot of them were hate, were appearing in my mind. And I was like so horrified by my mind because I thought, this is me. I am the evil person generating these thoughts. So I finally understood why people, would leave meditation retreats when we were holding meditation retreats if they had a chance, because I wanted to do exactly the same thing. I remember going to speak to Bante Ji. It was actually quite funny because he had this, I still remember, this box of tissues right there. So I entered and after 2 seconds I started crying because it was so emotional, and he just went like that. Waited for 15 minutes, like the end of the sort of period of time that we had for the interview. And then I was still crying. He's like, there's someone else waiting. And at the end of the retreat, I thought it was so unique to me. But actually, the reason why he had that was out of compassion for all the people who basically were wasting their time, not asking Dhamma questions to Bante Ji, but just entering and crying. So he was this incredible, wise man, one of the most accomplished, sentient beings that there are in this world, who most of his activity is to hand tissues to emotionally distraught people. But yeah, that's the opportunity where we can do mindfulness of emotions, mindfulness of mind, understand really what the mind is all about. And also the Buddha within this life, like the life when he became a fully enlightened being, when he talks about, when I was an unenlightened bodhisattva, that are my favorite suttas because they're very, relatable. It's like, yeah, thoughts of greed, hatred, and delusion appeared in my mind. So he starts investigating and contemplating them. Is this for the benefit of myself? Is this for the benefit of others? Is this the benefit for myself and others? So yeah, all of these are great blessings, opportunities where we can't escape our experience as humans, but we can actually understand what it is and understand, the three characteristics of dukkha, anicca, and anatta. And that's what, also getting back to the first question of non-self in relation to emotions, when we can have a deep understanding. So yes, intrusive thoughts, well, understand, like, what does that feel like? Instead of obsessing so much about the intrusive thoughts, how do they feel in the body? Look at the physical experience of those intrusive thoughts, because you actually are having a physical experience besides, keeping on chasing the thoughts. And look at that. That can be your object of meditation. And then the more you understand it, then the effect will become calm and peace. But if you are ignoring your experience and going like, be calm, be calm, be calm, be calm, be peaceful, be peaceful, be peaceful, you're cultivating greed, hatred, and delusion, essentially. Like the opposite of the purpose of meditation practice. All right. And last question. This has to be for Bhante. Are the stages described in the Anapanasati Sutta taken sequentially, or are they worked with as they arise?
I think in the particular sutta, I don't remember exactly what is the situation. But in general, I could say, could you please repeat that?
So are the stages described in the Anapanasati Sutta taken sequentially, or are they worked with as they arise?
Yes, in Mahasatipatthana Sutta, for example, that 16 stages, steps, they are also almost the same, right? In
The
Anapanasati Sutta?
The Anapanasati Sutta is the 16 steps.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this here we have to think in that sometimes at the beginning of your meditation, you can see that you have long breaths, a long incoming breath. Digang va asasanto, digang asasami iti pajanati. So when you breathe long, you recognize, you see that, you observe, you identify that you are breathing in long, and then you breathe out long, you recognize it. And when you breathe in short, you recognize it. And when you breathe out short, you recognize it. I think this is the same thing in Girimananda Sutta, in Satipatthana Sutta, in also this sutta. There are almost the same way. And then what do you call Sabbakaya Patisanvedi, the whole breath thing is explained, and whole breath is also defined in different ways by some teachers. So some people say, like, when you breathe, the whole body is involved, the whole physical body, and but in for example, Myanmar and most of the Sri Lankan teachers, they explain it as just the breath body, that kalam that comes in and go, that the beginning and the middle and the end of that breath kalam. This is what they call Sabbakaya Patisamvedi. And then when you keep meditating on this breath, the body becomes calm, and then it is Pasambhayankaya Sankaram. Then whole body becomes calm, and then you still observe asasissamiti sikkati, passasissamiti sikkati. I breathe in and I breathe out with that calm body. In that way, you will be able to go to deep samadhi and eventually attain the jhanas.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right, so that's the end of our evening together. Unless someone has questions here, we never actually asked the alive audience. But maybe we'll have opportunities this weekend. So weekend end maybe with a blessing chant. If Bhante Sumita would like to lead.
Sabbityo vivajjantu
Sabbarogo vinasatu mate bhavatvantarayo sukhi dikayuko bhava bhavatu sabba mangalam rakantu sabba devata sabba buddhanubhavena sada sotti bhavantu te Bhavatu sabba mangalam rakhantu sabba devata sabba dhammanubhavena sada sotti bhavantu te Bhavatu sabba mangalam rakhantu sabba devata sabba sanghanubhavena sada sotti bhavantu te Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
And hope to see you all on Sunday at the monastery for our Vesak celebration. Otherwise, next week for our live streams. May you all be well and happy and peaceful. And may all good things come